For centuries, the image of cave women has been reduced to a quiet figure crouched near a fire, picking berries while men fought monsters and hunted mammoths. But what if I told you this picture is completely wrong, and history has been lying to us since the beginning? Imagine women stalking giant bison across frozen plains, crafting razor-sharp stone blades, and painting sacred art on the walls of deep, echoing caves, while leading spiritual rituals that held entire tribes together. New archaeological findings prove that prehistoric women weren't passive bystanders. They were fearless hunters, expert toolmakers, endurance champions, medicine keepers, and even shamans who led with wisdom and power. The bones, the weapons, the cave art, the trauma patterns, the burial treasures, all scream one shocking truth. Women were not helpers in the Ice Age. They were warriors, innovators, and leaders who shaped human evolution equally beside men. This realization doesn't just rewrite ancient history, it destroys the myths we still believe today about strength, ability, and gender. So before you picture another weak cave woman picking berries, get ready to uncover the mind-blowing truth our ancestors left carved in stone and buried in the earth, because everything you thought you knew about cave women is about to change forever. Waking in the icy pre-dawn darkness of the Paleolithic world, a cave woman did not stretch lazily like a passive caretaker, but jolted into action like a seasoned survivor whose very first breath was a calculation of danger and duty. Her ears instantly tuned to the crackle of embers, assessing whether the embers in the fire pit had survived the night, or if the entire clan was now at risk of freezing, because in this world, a single lapse in vigilance could spell the annihilation of the entire family within hours. And this woman, with muscles conditioned not by vanity but by relentless necessity, slipped from furs and immediately began the work of survival with the precision of a warrior and the foresight of a strategist, reaching for chunks of tinder and flint to revive the protective flames, her hands scarred but steady from years of crafting stone blades sharp enough to gut a reindeer or slice through the thick hide of an aurochs. And as light seeped in through the mouth of the cave, she glanced at the spears leaning against the wall. Her own weapons, not borrowed or symbolic, but used repeatedly in real hunts where she had sprinted after wounded prey, with a stamina that no man around her could consistently match. Because while men had power bursts, she had the indomitable endurance of a marathon predator, her lungs like bellows fed by the hormone engine nature gave her, estrogen boosting her muscle recovery and allowing her to move for hours without stopping. And by the time others stirred, she had already checked the stone blades she'd napped herself the day before, their edges glinting in the dim light, ready not only to butcher game but also to carve wood, scrape hides, and fend off wolves. And soon she left the cave, not to stroll idly, but to scout the terrain, memorize snow tracks, gather medicinal herbs hidden beneath frost, and locate tree bark fibers for making carrying nets. Her mind, a living encyclopedia of botanical data essential for the tribe's survival, processing which plants were edible, which roots could detoxify meat, and which leaves could heal infection or numb pain. This database not written anywhere but engraved in her memory because forgetting a single poisonous berry or misidentifying a leaf could kill her children or elders. And as she trekked, tiny children followed, not clinging helplessly, but eager apprentices learning each survival trick by imitation. And as the sun climbed, she joined the hunting party, not as a passive tag-along, but as a full participant, running alongside men, her eyes locked on fleeing prey, her breathing steady as she helped drive a reindeer across open tundra, using persistence hunting tactics that required relentless pursuit over miles of land until the animal collapsed from exhaustion, her body adapting to the harsh rhythm of pursuit, sweat freezing on her brow, while adrenaline coursed through her bloodstream. And once the kill was made, she helped carve the carcass, her hands bloodied not from gentleness, but from survival. And while returning, she selected specific bones for tool-making, visualizing which shards could become awls or blades, and which larger pieces could become spiritual talismans or grave offerings, because spirituality was interwoven with her daily life, not as a follower, but often as a leader, chanting quiet prayers to ancestral spirits she believed dwelled in the wind, the fire, the animals, and her voice carried authority rooted in generations of tradition. And back at the camp, there was no comfortable separation of labor. She seamlessly shifted from hunter to smith, From herbalist to caregiver, teaching children how to strike flint for sparks, how to shape a blade that wouldn't shatter under pressure, all while kneading seeds and roots into dough using a grinding stone, her arms moving with rhythmic power as she prepared a form of early bread. And while the dough baked in a crude stone oven, she stitched hide garments using needles made of bone, occasionally pausing to examine the wounds on her legs, scars of past hunts that matched the trauma patterns found equally in male and female skeletons thousands of years later. And even as evening approached, her role intensified because she was also the keeper of stories, providing identity and cultural memory, recounting epic hunts and ancestral spirits through painted symbols on the cave walls, her hands dipping into mineral pigments to create art, not as decoration, but as magic, a way to bind the tribe's spirit, to ask for protection, to pass down knowledge. And when archaeologists like Dean Snow measured ancient handprints centuries later, they'd uncover that many of those prints were made by women like her, confirming that she wasn't a silent caretaker, but a creator of knowledge etched into stone. And as night fell, she led small rituals by the fire, sprinkling herbs into the flames and chanting quietly, not just praying, but embodying leadership that the community recognized deeply. Because in a world where every sunrise was uncertain, her strength and wisdom were as vital as any man's spear. And as she lay down eventually, exhausted but alert, she wasn't finished. Her mind still wove plans for tomorrow's hunt, tomorrow's tools, tomorrow's children's lessons, proving that Paleolithic womanhood was not a role of quiet obedience, but a relentless storm of intelligence, stamina, and power wrapped in flesh and bone, a reality that modern society forgot, but which the archaeological record is now finally beginning to remember. In the flickering glow of torchlight deep within a sacred cavern, the cave woman was not just flesh and muscle, but a vessel of the unseen, stepping into her role not merely as hunter or gatherer, but as priestess of shadows, her footsteps echoing in the stone chamber that had witnessed generations of chants. And as she pressed her pigment-stained fingers against the cold wall, leaving behind a handprint that would outlive her by 30,000 years, she wasn't decorating, she was invoking, binding the tribe's fate to spirits of the hunt, calling upon forces modern minds have forgotten, because within the labyrinth of ancient caves, women were the architects of spiritual memory, wielding ochre, charcoal, and manganese like sacred scripts, interpreting the creaks of stone, the howl of the wind, the movement of stars, and transforming these signs into living art and ritual, and the evidence is overwhelming. Archaeologists like Dean Snow measured hundreds of hand stencils and discovered most were made by women, and those prints weren't childlike doodles, but the signatures of spiritual leaders who guided their clans through terror and triumph. And as she painted great bison, mammoths, horses, and bears along the cavern walls, her pigments mixing with sweat and smoke, she was marking prophecy, not vanity, performing ceremony to ensure the next hunt would bring meat, and the next winter would spare the children, and later generations would find these art pieces and mistakenly call them the work of idle men, not realizing women often led the rituals, carried the memory, designed the cosmology, and when a member of the tribe died, it was often she who oversaw the burial, carefully arranging weapons, beads, and carved figurines around the body, whispering the old prayers, because she understood that death was not an end, but a transition, and her role as shaman was earned, not given, confirmed by archaeological finds like the 8,500-year-old Bad Dürrenberg shaman burial in Germany, where a woman was interred with a headdress of deer antlers, boar, tusk pendants, crane bones, and red clay reserved only for revered leaders, and her grave was not a domestic corner, but a spiritual chamber, showing clearly that women held supreme ritual authority. And while modern society imagines cave women as silent helpmates, the truth is ancient society often turned to women for spiritual guidance during illness, plague, or drought, because they were the ones who carried secrets of medicinal plants, mixed poultices that could fight infection, summoned herbal smoke to cleanse wounds, and interpreted dreams as messages from ancestors. And every symbol she painted on stone held layers of meaning. A spiral could signify life cycles. A running horse could mean luck in the hunt. A handprint could seal a pact with the spirit of the land, and her chants, carried by the drumbeat of hollow logs or animal hide stretched over frames, echoed through the cave, binding the tribe in trance. And at night, when wolves howled at the entrance, and the men tightened their grips on spears, she stepped forward and made the sign of protection upon the fire, tracing circles in the air and reminding everyone that the world was full of spirits, both benevolent and vengeful. And because she mastered the art of reading those invisible forces, she became indispensable, treated with a respect that the modern world fails to imagine. And this is why in burial sites from Spain to Siberia, women have been found with stone daggers, bone flutes, shell necklaces, amber beads, and ceremonial staffs, objects not of domestic duty but of ritual significance. And when someone suffered illness or injury, they turned to her, not just for herbal remedies, but to intercede with the spirits. And she knew exactly which roots could numb pain, which mushrooms could cause visions, which tree bark could bring down fever. And thus she was a healer, a mystic, and a leader. And those long nights of painting in the deepest parts of the cave were not leisure. They were sacred tasks performed by torchlight that revealed glowing animal shapes suddenly leaping to life in the shimmering darkness. And so when modern archaeologists see those animal figures with precise muscular detail and ethereal movement, they now realize that these were likely painted by women, meaning that much of the famous cave art that defines our understanding of Paleolithic creativity was authored by female hands, rewriting our understanding of human cultural evolution. And imagine her standing before the finished painting, chest coated with red ochre, beads rattling as she moves, chanting to the spirit of the hunt. The flickering light making the animals dance on the wall like living things. And the tribe sees this not as art, but as power. And her authority overtakes even that of the strongest warrior, because while a spear can bring down a beast, her ritual could safeguard the soul, guide the tribe's future, and comfort their dead. And even when she aged and her knees ached and hair turned silver, she became even more revered, treated as a living bridge to the ancestors. And young women gathered around her not to learn cooking, but to learn power, to mix pigments, carve symbols, perform sacred dances, and invoke ancestral blessings. And so, in the spiritual hierarchy of the Ice Age, women were not servants, but architects, directors, and keepers of the invisible. And as archaeologists now analyze burial sites with high-status grave goods and elaborate ornamentation associated with women, the truth is undeniable. These cave women shaped the spiritual destiny of their people. And when modern scientists dismiss these women as berry pickers, we now know they are erasing the wisdom, magic, and leadership that once thrived in icy caves, where a woman's voice could rise in song and send chills through every spine because they believed she spoke with the dead, commanded the spirits, and held cosmic authority. And to understand Paleolithic society, to truly understand our own origins, we must restore her rightful place as shaman, priestess, healer, painter, storyteller, leader, intercessor, and visionary, whose fire-lit rituals carved humanity's earliest moral codes and cultural identity into the stone flesh of the earth itself. When the first seeds were pressed into the earth and humans abandoned the wild pursuit of prey for the static burden of fields, everything began to unravel because the very moment agriculture took root, land replaced people as the center of value, property replaced community, and power shifted violently from those who provided survival to those who owned space. And this change crushed a way of life that had lasted millions of years, shattering the egalitarian rhythm where women had hunted, chanted, painted, forged, and led. Because when crops became currency and land inheritance became obsession, men began to claim certainty over lineage, controlling women's bodies to ensure bloodlines and heirs. And suddenly, the same woman who once chased reindeer across the tundra, reciting sacred songs in caves, became a commodity locked to a piece of land, her voice dismissed, her tools taken, her art erased, her spiritual authority stolen. And if you examine the bones from farming communities, you see the evidence. Women's teeth show disease. Their spines bend from carrying grinding stones day after day, and their burial goods vanish, replaced by silence in the archaeological record. A silence so loud it took modern science thousands of years to even question it. And society began rewriting the story, pretending that for all of human history, women had merely harvested, nurtured, obeyed, forgetting that for 3 million years they had carried spears, shaped flint, and summoned spirits. And historians painted this lie as natural. Textbook diagrams showed cavemen hunting mammoths while women crouched beside fires. The myth so strong that even in the 20th century, scientists labeled graves with weapons as male, even when the skeleton was clearly female, proving how deep bias runs. And so generation after generation grew up believing strength belonged to only half the species. But the truth has risen like a fossil from the earth, undeniable and roaring. And we now know that women hunted 30,000 years ago, shoulder to shoulder with men. That cave art's most common handprint belonged to women. That the earliest known shaman was female. That Paleolithic clans depended on women's knowledge of plants, their endurance during long hunts, their strategies during survival. Yet all of this collapsed the moment farming chained humanity to land, creating borders, inheritance, property, patriarchal control, a system that valued ownership over cooperation, a system that devalued those whose worth could not be measured in land or war. And even today, echoes of that shift cling to modern life like mud on boots, making girls believe they were never hunters, making women feel they must fight for rights they already had for millions of years. And this is why understanding what really happened matters, not to reverse time, but to reclaim truth, because the story of Paleolithic women proves that gender roles today are not natural or ancient. They are historical accidents born from farming and hierarchy, not evolution or biology. And this knowledge should burn within us like a torch, reminding every woman that her ancestors were not fragile but ferocious, not silent but central, and every man should know his survival once depended equally on the women beside him who could run miles with a spear, treat his wounds, chant over his spirit, and teach his children. And as we look back on cave walls painted in flickering light, we are not just seeing art. We are hearing voices of women who led entire tribes, and their whispers tell us that inequality is not fate, but a failure to remember where we came from. And when you stand in a modern museum staring at a glass case showing a caveman front and center, remember that archaeologists are rewriting those displays right now because the evidence is overwhelming. The weapons buried with women, the trauma in their bones, the pigments on their hands, the graves full of ritual objects all prove that women were not afterthoughts, but co-creators of humanity's greatest achievements. And so, the fall that began with farming is not the end of their story, because we are living in a moment where that buried truth is rising again, empowering a new generation to reject the old myth and recognize that human evolution was a partnership of equals, forged in ice, blood, fire, and wisdom. And we cannot heal what is broken today unless we honor the reality of those who came before, because Paleolithic women did not wait for permission to lead, to hunt, to chant. They simply did it because survival demanded it. And today, survival still demands equality, cooperation, shared strength, and respect for knowledge, whether it comes from a spear thrower or a healer's hands. So the next time someone tells you that for millions of years men dominated and women followed, remember the truth carved in stone across Europe and Asia, the truth buried in graves filled with spears and spiritual regalia given to women, the truth etched in cave walls by women who shaped the future, and let that truth ignite your will to challenge every lie told in the name of tradition. Because if Paleolithic women once stood on frozen cliffs tracking mammoths with fire in their eyes, then modern women carry that same flame in their veins. And no lie forged in the brief span of agriculture can extinguish a legacy written across 3 million years of ice and survival.